What if everything you've been taught about seeking God's kingdom has been completely backwards? What if the very reason your prayers seem to echo into emptiness, why your spiritual practices feel hollow, and why abundance continues to elude you despite your deepest faith? What if all of this stems from one fundamental misunderstanding that's been passed down through generations? You've heard it your entire life. Seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. Pastors preach it from pulpits. Spiritual teachers quote it in seminars. Your grandmother probably whispered it to you during difficult times. But here's the question nobody dares to ask. Has anyone ever actually explained what it means? Not the religious interpretation, not the philosophical speculation, but what Jesus was truly pointing to when he spoke those words. For most of us, the answer is no. We've accepted this profound teaching as some distant promise, something we hope to experience. Someday, somewhere beyond this life, we've turned it into another item on our spiritual to-do list, another discipline to master, another external goal to achieve. And that's precisely why it doesn't work. Has this ever happened to you? You pray with all your heart, you follow every spiritual practice you've been taught, you maintain your faith, even when circumstances scream otherwise. And yet, the breakthrough never comes. The abundance remains just out of reach. The peace you're seeking feels like a beautiful concept that works for others, but somehow eludes you. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Now, what you're about to discover might surprise you, perhaps even challenge everything you thought you knew about spiritual truth. Edgar Cayce, one of history's most remarkable mystics, uncovered something the religious world has overlooked for centuries. He discovered that the kingdom of God isn't a location in some distant heaven. It's not a reward waiting for you after death. It's not even something external that you must search the universe to find. Stay with me until the end, because this understanding changes everything, and I mean everything, about how you experience life right now. The kingdom Jesus spoke of is a state of consciousness. It's an awareness of divine presence that already exists within you at this precise moment. Not tomorrow, not after you've perfected yourself, not when you've finally become worthy enough. Right now, as you're reading these words, the very thing you've been desperately seeking outside yourself has been inside you all along. When Jesus said, "Seek first the kingdom," he wasn't giving you another spiritual assignment. He was pointing you inward, directing you away from the endless chase for external solutions and toward the infinite source already present within your own consciousness. This isn't just beautiful poetry or spiritual philosophy. This is the missing key that transforms everything. Your finances, your health, your relationships, your sense of purpose and peace. And what makes this even more profound is that this shift happens instantly, not after years of meditation practice, not after you've read every spiritual book or attended every workshop. The transformation occurs in the precise moment you truly grasp what Cayce discovered, that you've been looking in the wrong direction all along. It's like suddenly realizing you've been searching everywhere for your glasses while they were on your head the entire time. The moment you understand, everything changes. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this might shake up some deeply held beliefs. Most of us have been approaching spirituality completely backwards. We wake up in the morning and immediately start praying for things. We beg for healing when we're sick. We visualize the perfect relationship, the ideal job, the financial breakthrough. We close our eyes and desperately hope that if we pray hard enough, believe strong enough, God will finally deliver what we need. Sound familiar? This is what Cayce identified as humanity's greatest spiritual mistake, what he called seeking second. Think about it. When you pray for money, You're putting your financial circumstances first and asking consciousness to fix them. When you beg for healing, you're prioritizing your physical symptoms and hoping the divine will intervene. You're essentially treating God like some kind of cosmic vending machine. Insert enough prayers, press the right buttons, and out comes your blessing. But that's not how divine intelligence works. That's not what the ancient masters were teaching. That's not the hidden truth. Behind "seek first the kingdom" is the revelation that religious institutions don't want you to understand, because it would completely transform their entire structure of authority. God isn't separate from you, waiting somewhere in the clouds to be convinced of your worthiness. Infinite intelligence isn't external to your being, judging whether you've accumulated enough good deeds to deserve abundance. The divine is the very substance of who you are. It's not something you pray to. It's something you live from. It's not something you reach for. It's something you recognize already within you. It's not something you must earn. It's something you rest in right now, in this present moment. This understanding creates a complete mindset shift. You stop being a beggar at the door of heaven and start being a conscious expression of divinity itself. You stop seeking solutions in the material world and start recognizing the infinite source within your own consciousness. The impact of this single decision to seek first the kingdom, to prioritize inner awareness over outer circumstances, ripples through every area of your life in ways you cannot even imagine yet. Now, I want to go even deeper into this revelation, because what Cayce taught next is where the real transformation begins. Write in the comments, "I'm ready for this truth." So what does this actually look like in practice? How do you make this shift from seeking second to seeking first? It's simpler than you might think, yet more profound than most spiritual teachings you've encountered. Seeking first the kingdom means you literally stop doing what you've always done. You stop staring at your bank account with anxiety, telling yourself, "This needs fixing." You stop obsessing over your body's symptoms, declaring, "This needs healing." You stop analyzing your difficult relationships, insisting, "This needs changing." That entire approach keeps you trapped in the material world, constantly reacting to circumstances, forever chasing solutions that seem just beyond your grasp. Instead, you turn inward. You acknowledge divine presence. You feel, not imagine, not pretend, but actually feel the infinite completeness already established within your consciousness. This isn't positive thinking, where you're trying to convince yourself everything is fine when it clearly isn't. This isn't spiritual bypassing, where you ignore real problems. This is recognition. You're recognizing what already is, what has always been, what can never be diminished by temporary circumstances. You're touching the eternal substance beneath the changing surface of life. If this resonates with you, subscribe to continue this journey. Each video here reveals deeper truths about living from consciousness rather than circumstances. And here's where the real mystery begins, the part that sounds impossible until you experience it yourself. When you genuinely practice this recognition, when you truly seek first the kingdom, within, something mystical happens. The outer world begins to rearrange itself without your manipulation. I'm not talking about wishful thinking or coincidence. I'm talking about tangible transformation. Solutions appear that you weren't even looking for. Resources flow from unexpected directions. Healing occurs in ways that defy medical explanation. Relationships shift without difficult conversations. Opportunities emerge that weren't there yesterday. But here's the crucial part. None of this happens because you forced it. You didn't visualize it into existence. You didn't affirm it 1,000 times. You didn't manipulate energy or convince the universe to give you what you want. What happened is far more elegant, far more powerful. You aligned with the truth of your being. You stopped interfering with consciousness's natural abundance. You got out of your own way and let divine intelligence express itself through your life. It's like removing a dam from a river. You don't make the water flow, you simply stop blocking what was always meant to flow freely. Edgar Cayce spent decades perfecting what he called the practice of the presence. Now, this technique is deceptively simple. When I share it with you, your mind might dismiss it as too easy, too basic to create real change. But this practice contains more transformative power than 1,000 affirmations, more life-altering impact than years of visualization exercises. And the reason is profound. It doesn't try to add anything to you. It doesn't attempt to make you better, more spiritual, more worthy. It simply reveals what you already are beneath all the conditioning, beneath all the fear, beneath all the stories you've been told about who you're supposed to be. The journey into this practice is where everything we've discussed becomes real, tangible, lived experience, rather than just beautiful concepts. Put in the comments, "I'm beginning to see." Here's exactly how you begin. Find a quiet moment in your day. It doesn't have to be elaborate or perfect. You don't need candles, incense, or a meditation cushion. Just find 5 minutes where you won't be interrupted. Close your eyes. And here's what's different from every other practice you've tried. You're not going to pray for anything. You're not going to ask for anything. You're not going to beg, plead, or bargain with the divine. Instead, you're going to silently acknowledge what already is. You simply say to yourself, from the deepest place, within, I and the Father are one. The kingdom of God is within me now. Divine presence is the reality of my being. These aren't magic words you're trying to make true. This isn't an affirmation you're hoping will work if you repeat it enough times. This is recognition. You're acknowledging what has always been true, whether you were aware of it or not. Stay in this awareness for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. When thoughts about your problems arise, and they will, you gently return to presence. When worries about money intrude, bring your attention back. When concerns about health surface, come back to the kingdom within. Now, I need to be completely honest with you about something, because this is where most people get tripped up. The results you experience from this practice don't come from doing it perfectly. They don't come from having the right posture, the right breathing technique, or the right mental state. Cayce worked with thousands of students over his lifetime, and what he discovered was fascinating. Some people experienced instant, dramatic transformation. Their entire life shifted within days. Others practiced for weeks before they felt any change. And here's the revelation. The difference had nothing to do with talent, spiritual gifts, or worthiness. The only difference was the depth of their recognition, the sincerity of their acknowledgement. Were they going through motions, or were they genuinely touching something real within themselves? This is crucial to understand, because you might practice today and feel absolutely nothing. You might sit for 5 minutes and your mind might race the entire time. You might acknowledge divine presence and feel like you're just talking to yourself. That's completely normal. In fact, it's part of the process. What you're doing beneath the surface is far more profound than what you're experiencing on the surface. You're undoing years, maybe decades, of conditioning that taught you to seek solutions outside yourself. You're rewiring neural pathways that learn to panic at every problem, that trained themselves to believe your worth depends on external circumstances, that convinced you that security comes from your bank account rather than from consciousness itself. This is deep transformation happening at the level of your nervous system, your subconscious mind, your entire relationship with reality. Give yourself grace in this journey. Some days you'll feel profound peace during the practice. Other days, your mind will resist violently. Both experiences are teaching you something essential, The key isn't perfection, it's persistence. It's returning again and again to the kingdom within, regardless of how it feels, regardless of whether you see immediate results. Leave a comment saying, "I'm committed to this practice," because here's what really matters: consistency, not perfection. You don't need to meditate for hours. You don't need to achieve some blissful state of consciousness. You simply need to seek first the kingdom every single morning, even if it's just for 60 seconds, especially on the days when life feels chaotic, when circumstances are screaming for your attention, when everything inside you wants to skip the practice and dive straight into problem-solving mode. Those are precisely the days when this 5-minute decision makes the most profound impact. Let me share a real story that illustrates exactly how this works in the messy reality of everyday life. There was a woman named Sarah, a single mother drowning in debt. She was working 3 jobs that barely covered her rent. Every morning she woke up with her chest tight, her mind already calculating which bill she could delay, which creditor she could avoid. The stress was crushing her, and no amount of hard work seemed to make any difference. She discovered Cayce's teachings completely by accident. Someone had left one of his books at the laundromat where she was washing her kids' clothes. She almost threw it away, but something made her read the first page. What she read challenged everything she believed about how to solve her problems. Sarah started practicing the very next morning, 5 minutes before dawn while her children were still sleeping. And here's what's important. She didn't pray for money. She didn't beg for financial relief. She didn't visualize her bank account growing or affirm abundance statements. She simply rested in the awareness that infinite supply is the truth of consciousness, that the kingdom within her was already complete, already whole, already containing everything she needed. The first week was brutal. Nothing changed externally. The bills kept piling up, creditors kept calling. Her anxiety still gripped her chest at night when she tried to sleep. Her rational mind kept screaming that this spiritual practice was a waste of time, that she should be using those 5 minutes to pick up an extra shift or find another job. But something deeper kept her returning to the practice. And gradually, something extraordinary began happening, not in her circumstances, but within her. A quiet knowing emerged beneath the panic. She found herself less reactive when the phone rang, less consumed by fear when she opened her mailbox, more present with her children instead of mentally spiraling into worst-case scenarios. She couldn't explain it logically, but she felt different. The external pressure was still there, but somehow it wasn't crushing her the same way. There was something solid beneath the chaos, something that circumstances couldn't shake. This internal shift was subtle at first, barely noticeable, but it was real. And it was about to change everything in ways she couldn't have imagined, because when consciousness shifts, reality has no choice but to follow. Type in the comments, "I feel this shift happening." Within a few weeks, unexpected things started happening in Sarah's life. A former client she hadn't heard from in over a year called out of nowhere, offering her double her usual rate for a project. Her landlord, who had always been strict about payments, unexpectedly reduced her rent without her even asking. Small miracles began appearing that felt less like coincidences and more like natural unfoldments, as if life itself was reorganizing around her new internal state. Within 3 months, Sarah's entire financial situation had completely transformed, not through a new strategy, not through working harder or hustling. More, the transformation came through consciousness shift. She had stopped seeking solutions in the material world and started recognizing the infinite supply already present within her awareness. The external world simply reflected what had already changed internally. Now, I want you to understand something crucial here. This isn't just about money. The principle Cayce discovered works across every area of human experience. Let me tell you about Michael, a successful businessman who seemingly had everything: The career, the wealth, the respect, everything except the one thing that mattered most: his health. He was facing a stage 3 diagnosis. The doctors were clear, brutally honest. He had months, maybe a year if the treatment worked. Michael had built an empire, accumulated millions, but none of it could buy him what he desperately needed. Traditional medicine offered procedures, medications, hope, but not certainty. In his desperation, searching for anything that might help, Michael discovered Cayce's lectures on consciousness and healing. At first, his rational mind dismissed it as wishful thinking, spiritual fantasy that couldn't possibly address the very real disease destroying his body. But something in Cayce's words struck him differently. It wasn't the typical positive thinking message. It wasn't about denying reality or pretending everything was fine. It was something far more radical, something that challenged the very foundation of how we understand illness and healing. Cayce taught Michael that the body isn't actually the problem. The real issue is our identification with the body as something separate from divine wholeness. We see the body as vulnerable, subject to decay, at the mercy of circumstances beyond our control. We give the physical form ultimate authority over our consciousness. But seeking first the kingdom means recognizing that perfect spiritual substance is the only true reality. This doesn't mean denying the diagnosis or pretending the symptoms don't exist. It means refusing to give those temporary conditions ultimate power over your consciousness, over who you truly are beneath the physical experience. Michael began to understand that he had spent his entire life seeking second, building external success while ignoring the infinite source within. His whole identity had been wrapped up in what his body could do, what his mind could achieve, what his circumstances reflected about his worth. Share in the comments. Consciousness is primary. So Michael began practicing religiously. Every morning and every evening he turned within. He acknowledged divine perfection as the truth of his being. He didn't fight the disease. He didn't visualize his cells healing. He simply rested in spiritual wholeness, in the recognition that consciousness is primary and the body is secondary. And here's what happened. His symptoms actually got worse at first. The pain increased. The fatigue deepened. Everything in his rational mind screamed that this approach was foolish, that he was wasting precious time that could be spent on aggressive treatment. But Michael kept returning to the practice, kept seeking first the kingdom. And then something extraordinary began to unfold. Not an overnight miracle where he woke up suddenly healed. Instead, a progressive restoration started happening. His next round of tests showed unexpected improvement, small changes that the doctors couldn't explain. Then, more significant, shifts. The medical team was baffled. The disease was behaving in ways they hadn't seen before, almost as if it was reversing course. Within a year, Michael was completely clear. Every scan, every test came back clean. He never claimed that Cayce's practice healed him. What he said was far more profound. The practice revealed the healing that was already present in consciousness, waiting to be recognized. Go ahead and subscribe if you're ready for more. This is where we explore practical mysticism that creates real transformation in your life. Now let me share another story, because this principle applies to emotional and mental struggles just as powerfully as it does to physical and financial challenges. Rebecca had struggled with crippling anxiety for 15 years. Not occasional worry, debilitating panic attacks that controlled her life. She'd tried everything the conventional system offered. Therapy helped her manage the symptoms, gave her coping strategies, taught her to recognize her triggers. Medication numbed the worst of it, but nothing ever touched the root. The anxiety was always there, lurking beneath the surface, ready to explode at any moment. She attended one of Cayce's workshops reluctantly, dragged there by a friend who insisted it would help. She expected the usual spiritual platitudes, the toxic positivity that tells you to just think happy thoughts and everything will be fine. Instead, she heard something that shattered her entire understanding of what anxiety actually is. Cayce explained that anxiety isn't primarily a chemical imbalance that needs pharmaceutical correction. It's the soul's response to seeking security in temporary things. Every time you look to circumstances for peace, to your job, your relationship, your bank account, your health, you're guaranteed to experience anxiety because circumstances are constantly changing. They can never provide the stability you're desperately seeking, but the kingdom within never wavers. Divine presence is the only true security. Rebecca began the practice skeptically, almost defiantly. She didn't believe it would work, but she was desperate enough to try anything. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It was gradual, subtle, but absolutely undeniable. Anxiety attacks became less frequent, then less intense, then rare. After 6 months, Rebecca realized she'd gone weeks without a single panic episode. But here's what stunned her. Her external circumstances hadn't improved at all. Her job was still stressful, actually more demanding than before. Her relationship still had the same challenges, but she had discovered something that circumstances couldn't touch, an inner anchor that remained steady regardless of what was happening around her. Right, I'm finding my anchor. Perhaps the most striking story is that of Thomas, a pastor who had preached about God's kingdom for 30 years without actually understanding what he was teaching. Think about that for a moment. 3 decades of sermons, thousands of prayers, countless hours studying scripture, and yet the very thing he was pointing others toward remained a mystery to him. His religion had become performance. He taught his congregation to pray harder, give more, believe stronger. But privately, Thomas struggled with profound doubt and emptiness. His prayers felt like they echoed into silence. The God he preached about felt distant, unreachable, almost fictional. Then Thomas discovered Cayce's teachings on mystical Christianity, and everything he thought he knew completely shattered. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't easy. Cayce revealed something that challenged the entire foundation of Thomas's ministry, that the kingdom isn't something you earn through religious activity. It's not accessed through correct doctrine or perfect theological understanding. It's the ever-present reality of divine consciousness, closer to you than your own breath, more intimate than your thoughts. You don't become worthy of it through religious performance. You simply recognize that you've never been separate from it. Thomas spent an entire year unlearning, releasing beliefs that had defined his identity for decades, letting go of the exhausting burden of trying to please a distant God who was judging his every move. And in that space of unlearning, he discovered something he'd been teaching about, but had never truly experienced, the intimate presence within. Not out there in some distant heaven, but right here, right now, as the very ground of his being. This journey of unlearning is crucial because most of us carry layers upon layers of conditioning about how spirituality is supposed to work. We've been trained to react in specific ways when problems arise. Your conditioned response to difficulty is immediate panic. Financial issue hits. Your mind spirals into worst-case scenarios. Health symptom appears. Fear floods your entire system. Relationship conflict erupts. Emotional chaos takes over. This automatic reaction is what keeps you trapped in seeking second. You're prioritizing the problem over presence, giving circumstances more power than consciousness. But Cayce taught a radically different response, one that breaks this habitual pattern completely. When a challenge arises, you pause before reacting, before planning your next move, before panicking about outcomes, before letting fear dictate your decisions. In that pause, you turn within. You acknowledge the kingdom. You silently recognize divine presence as the only real power operating in your life. Now, this doesn't mean denying that the problem appears real. It's not about pretending everything is fine when it clearly isn't. It's about refusing to give the appearance ultimate authority over your consciousness. You're making a decision in that moment about what's primary, circumstances or consciousness. And that single decision changes how everything unfolds from that point forward. Leave a comment. I choose consciousness first. Let me give you something practical you can use immediately. The next time difficulty appears in your life, and it will, try this. Take 3 conscious breaths, not rushed, not shallow, but 3 deliberate breaths where you're fully present to the act of breathing itself. And as you breathe, internally affirm these words: the kingdom of God is my reality. Infinite intelligence governs this situation. I seek first the consciousness of divine presence. Then, from that centered place, address the practical issue. Notice what happens. You'll find that solutions emerge more clearly, actions flow more naturally. The frantic energy that usually accompanies problem-solving dissolves, replaced by something steadier, more grounded. This isn't about bypassing responsibility or ignoring what needs to be done. It's about the foundation from which you act. Now, I need to explain something that most spiritual teachers get completely wrong, and this misunderstanding keeps millions of people stuck in cycles that never actually resolve anything. There's a fundamental difference between treating a problem and recognizing truth. Most spiritual practices operate from treatment. You affirm health because you believe in sickness. You visualize abundance because you feel lack. You pray for peace because you're experiencing turmoil. And here's the hidden trap. Every single treatment reinforces the very problem you're trying to solve. By treating sickness, you're acknowledging sickness as real and powerful enough to need treatment. By visualizing abundance, you're confirming that lack is your current reality. You're actually strengthening the problem's grip on your consciousness while believing you're dissolving it. Recognition works from an entirely different paradigm. You're not treating the problem at all. You're recognizing what's true beneath the appearance. This is subtle but revolutionary in its impact. When Cayce faced financial lack, he didn't sit around affirming abundance, repeating "I am wealthy" 1,000 times, hoping to convince himself and the universe. Instead, he recognized infinite supply as the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. Not something he needed to create or attract, but something that already existed as spiritual law. When confronted with discord in his relationships or his work, he didn't treat for harmony. He acknowledged divine order as the established reality beneath temporary chaos. Do you see the difference? Treatment is always fighting against appearance. It's pushing against what seems to be happening, trying to force a different outcome through mental effort. Recognition rests in truth. It doesn't fight anything. It simply acknowledges what's real at the level of consciousness, regardless of what's appearing at the level of circumstances. One approach exhausts you because you're constantly battling. The other restores you because you're aligning with what already is. This shift from treatment to recognition might seem like semantics, like we're just playing with words, but the experiential difference is profound. When you treat, you're tense, effortful, hoping it works. When you recognize, you're relaxed, natural, knowing it's already true. Put down recognition, not treatment. This brings us to something that completely transforms how you approach life itself, the shift from effort to grace. Look at how most people operate. They exhaust themselves trying to make things happen, working harder, pushing more, forcing outcomes through sheer willpower, manipulating circumstances, controlling every variable, desperately attempting to manufacture the results they want. It's absolutely draining. You've probably lived this way yourself. I know I have. The constant pressure to make it all work, to hold everything together, to ensure nothing falls apart. And the cruel irony is that all this effort often produces minimal results while consuming maximum energy. But grace operates on an entirely different principle. Grace is the natural flow of good from consciousness to experience. It's what happens when you stop blocking the river and let it flow. When you seek first the kingdom, you tap into this current. You stop efforting and start allowing. You take inspired action rather than desperate action. You work from a place of fullness instead of emptiness, from confidence instead of fear, from knowing instead of hoping. Cayce described this as the difference between human effort and divine activity. One depletes you completely, the other energizes you even as you're actively engaged. This understanding completely changes meditation as well. Most people approach meditation as another task, another thing they need to do to get something they want. They sit down to meditate for peace, for answers, for healing, for manifestation. They're still operating from seeking second, using spiritual practice as a tool to fix their material problems. But Cayce taught something radically different. Meditation is pure listening. You're not sitting in silence to extract something from the universe. You're sitting to be present, to feel the aliveness within you, to sense the presence that was there before your first thought, before your problems, before your entire identity was formed. This requires nothing from you except willingness to be still. No special techniques, no complicated breathing patterns, no mantras or visualizations. Just quiet awareness. Of awareness itself, and in that stillness, something profound happens. You touch what's real beneath all the noise, beneath all the drama, beneath all the circumstances that seem so urgent and overwhelming. Of course, your mind will resist this entire approach. Your conditioning will scream at you that this is impractical, irresponsible, dangerous even. Circumstances demand immediate attention. Bills need to be paid. Health symptoms need medical intervention. Relationships require active fixing. How can you possibly prioritize some internal practice when the external world is literally falling apart? This objection feels completely valid, absolutely rational. And that's precisely why it's such an effective trap. Because here's the truth that's hard to hear but essential to understand. Your struggles exist in the first place because you've been seeking second your entire life. You've prioritized circumstances over consciousness for so long that you've created the very chaos that now seems. To prove you can't afford to seek first, comment below, "I see the pattern now." Let me give you something you can test right now, today, with whatever challenge you're currently facing. Take your most pressing problem, the one that's keeping you awake at night, the one your mind returns to constantly. Before you analyze it, before you start planning solutions, before you let the familiar anxiety spiral begin, spend just 2 minutes acknowledging the kingdom within. Recognize divine intelligence as present and active in this situation. Then address the issue practically. Do whatever needs to be done, but do it from this foundation rather than from panic. Notice the difference in how you think. Your mind becomes clearer. Decisions feel more aligned. Actions flow more peacefully. The anxiety that usually accompanies problem-solving diminishes significantly. This isn't magic, it's priority. You're demonstrating what it means to seek first in the most practical way possible. But here's where many people stumble on this path, and I want to address it directly so you don't fall into the same trap. You'll practice for a week, maybe 2, and your impatient mind will start demanding results. Why hasn't my life completely transformed yet? I've been doing the practice faithfully. Where's my breakthrough? Cayce warned extensively about this impatience because he saw it sabotage countless students who were right on the edge of genuine transformation. You need to understand what's actually happening beneath the surface. You're undoing decades of wrong seeking, years and years of conditioning that trained you to look outside yourself for what can only be found within. lifetimes perhaps of believing that matter is cause and consciousness is effect. This reversal doesn't typically happen overnight. The key insight is that transformation always happens in consciousness before it manifests in circumstances. The internal shift precedes the external change. You might practice for weeks and see nothing different in your bank account, your relationships, your health, but something profound is occurring in your consciousness. Neural pathways are literally rewiring. Belief systems that have governed your entire life are dissolving. Your awareness is expanding into dimensions you didn't know existed. The outer world must eventually reflect this inner transformation, its spiritual law. But you have to trust the process, even when appearances haven't caught up yet. And please, stop measuring your spiritual practice by material metrics. This is still seeking second in disguise. You practice for an hour and feel virtuous. You meditate for 5 minutes and feel inadequate. You're still quantifying, still comparing, still judging based on external measures. Cayce taught something that completely liberates you from this trap. One moment of genuine recognition holds more transformative power than hours of mechanical practice going through the motions. 5 minutes where you truly touch presence surpasses days of forced meditation, where your mind is wandering the entire time. The kingdom isn't accessed through duration, it's revealed through depth, through sincerity, through actually recognizing what's true rather than performing spirituality. Write in the comments, depth over duration. There's something else you need to prepare for on this journey, something that catches many people off guard and can shake their commitment if they're not ready for it. When you begin living from the kingdom within, when your responses to life start changing, people will notice, and not everyone will celebrate your transformation. Family members will question your new perspective. Friends will mock what they call your mystical phase. Colleagues might think you've lost touch with reality. Their skepticism can be intense, sometimes even aggressive, because your shift challenges their entire worldview. Cayce himself faced brutal criticism from the religious establishment of his time. They called his teachings dangerous, heretical, too radical for mainstream Christianity, but he remained absolutely unmoved, not through arrogance or defensiveness, but through knowing. He had experienced the kingdom within. He had witnessed countless lives transformed. No amount of external opinion could shake what he'd proven true through direct experience. You'll need this same grounded knowing, not to argue with skeptics or convince them of anything, but simply to remain steady in your practice regardless of their reaction. Here's the liberating truth. Their skepticism is their journey. Your transformation is yours. You don't need their approval, you don't need their understanding, you don't even need them to believe you. Let your life demonstrate the truth. Let your peace speak louder than their doubts. Let your results prove what words never could. Seeking first isn't a belief system requiring defense. It's a living reality requiring only demonstration. Now, I want to go even deeper into how this practice integrates into the fabric of your daily existence. Most people compartmentalize spirituality. They meditate for 15 minutes in the morning, then spend the rest of the day operating from ego consciousness. They acknowledge the kingdom briefly, then immediately return to seeking second for the next 23 hours. This split approach severely limits transformation. What Cayce taught was far more radical. Seeking first must evolve into continuous awareness, not that you're constantly meditating or always in some blissed-out state, but there's an ongoing recognition happening beneath your surface thoughts. As you work, there's a silent knowing that divine intelligence is guiding you. As you interact with people, you're recognizing presence in everyone you encounter. As challenges arise throughout your day, you're remembering the kingdom within, rather than immediately spiraling into reaction. This becomes as natural as breathing. You're not forcing it. You're simply living from a deeper awareness that's always accessible once you've tasted it, and this awareness completely transforms relationships, which is where most spiritual practice breaks down. You can maintain inner peace when you're alone, but add difficult people to the equation and consciousness shatters. Someone criticizes you and old patterns explode. But when you understand that every person is consciousness appearing as an individual, everything shifts. When you interact with another human being, you're not encountering their personality or their problems. You're meeting the same divine presence that exists within you. This recognition in you has the power to awaken recognition in them. Leave a comment. I recognize the divine in others. There's one area where even the most spiritually advanced practitioners tend to stumble, and that's money. You can maintain consciousness about health, relationships, purpose, but finances trigger something primal. When bills arrive, when unexpected expenses surface, when the bank account looks terrifyingly low, seeking second dominates everything else. The kingdom feels utterly irrelevant when rent is due. But here's what Cayce understood that transforms this entire relationship. Money isn't actually your supply. Consciousness is supply. Money is simply one form that supply takes, one of countless ways that infinite abundance expresses itself in the material world. When you seek first the kingdom, you're recognizing infinite supply as spiritual reality, as the fundamental nature of divine consciousness itself. This doesn't mean money magically materializes in your account overnight. What it means is far more radical. You stop believing that money is your source. You stop seeking security in bank balances. You start living from the inner, knowing that your true source is inexhaustible, unlimited, completely independent of economic conditions or market fluctuations. And from that foundation, you handle practical financial matters with clarity rather than desperation, with wisdom rather than fear. The deepest level of this practice reveals itself during crisis, when life falls apart, when your worst fears materialize, when everything you've carefully built suddenly crumbles. This is where seeking first transforms from interesting spiritual concept to essential lifeline. Crisis reveals what you truly believe. It shows you what foundation you're actually standing on, whether consciousness or circumstances hold ultimate authority in your life. And here's something most people don't know about Cayce. His greatest teachings didn't emerge from periods of ease and comfort. They came from his own devastating crises: illness that brought him to the edge of death, financial collapse that destroyed everything he'd worked for, dark nights of the soul where even his own faith was tested beyond measure. Through these crucibles, Cayce learned to seek first, not when life felt good, but precisely when everything felt impossible. To turn within, not when externally peaceful, but when internally shattered. To acknowledge the kingdom especially when circumstances screamed its absence. This level of practice requires everything from you. It's not casual spirituality for Sunday mornings. It's radical trust in the midst of devastation. You face loss and still recognize divine wholeness. You encounter darkness and still acknowledge inner light. Not through denial, not through pretending everything is fine, but through knowing something deeper than appearance, something more real than temporary circumstances. This is where total transformation completes itself. Your default response to life fundamentally changes. Crisis no longer triggers automatic panic. It prompts you to turn within. Challenges don't create paralyzing fear. They invite deeper recognition of what's real. Problems don't overwhelm you. They reveal new opportunities for consciousness to express itself. Through your experience, you've literally rewired how you relate to reality itself. Make consciousness your priority. Seek first the presence within. Recognize divine reality as primary and handle circumstances as secondary, not ignored, not denied, but addressed from unshakable inner foundation rather than desperate outer panic. Type, This changes everything. If you've stayed with me through this entire journey, I want you to know that says something significant about where you are right now. You're ready for this truth. You're prepared to live differently. And that readiness is itself the kingdom recognizing itself within you. This channel exists to share these transformative teachings that have been hidden, misunderstood, or diluted over the centuries. If what you discovered here resonates with something deep inside you, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe, not just to collect another channel in your feed, but because this is where we continue unpacking these life-changing principles together. Each video builds on the last, creating a complete understanding of how consciousness actually works in your daily experience. Leave me a comment saying, "This message was meant for me, so I know you made it all the way through." I read every single one, and there's something powerful about declaring your commitment publicly, about acknowledging that you're on this path. It strengthens your resolve and connects you with others walking the same journey. And if this resonated, if something shifted as you listened, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps this content reach others who are searching for exactly what you just discovered. People who are tired of empty prayers and failed manifestations, who are ready to understand what seeking first truly means. There's a video right here that goes even deeper into how consciousness creates your reality. It's the perfect continuation of what we've explored today. Click and continue with me over there. You'll be glad you did. Remember, the kingdom is within you right now, not someday, now, and you've just taken the first step in recognizing it.